Now to another matter entirely. Would you agree to being subjected to a face scan to check your age before you gamble online? What about if you log on to watch porn? Well, it's not a reality yet, far from it, but the idea has previously been floated by the Department of Home Affairs. It's interesting to think about in light of research showing Australians have been consuming porn at rapidly increasing rates. Emerging research by an academic from the University of Western Australia shows the volume of traffic to an adult porn site increased by an average of about 5% each month between 2014 and 2017. It also shows the majority of porn users are accessing it on their phones and overwhelmingly live in Australia's biggest capital cities. What are we to take from this, Rachel? And I mean, if this analysis is correct and that this is true across a range of sites and there is an increase in the consumption of porn, is that a cause for concern?
I think it certainly is. The research that we've seen come out recently has said that it's, I think, tripled in Australia over the last 3 years, porn viewing. Pornhub, which is one of the largest porn providers on the internet, this year has had 42 billion visits to its website. That number it's mind-boggling. I don't think you can actually even comprehend how much that is.
42 billion.
42 billion. Another statistic they had was 169 years of content uploaded this year, which if you started watching it in 1850, you would still be watching it right now. This is in 1 year. So the amount of pornography that's out there on the internet is staggering. And when we say pornography, we're not just saying, you know, videos of people having sex with each other. We're talking about increasingly violent, degrading imagery, particularly imagery of young girls and teenage girls being raped or sexually abused. And this is where our young people are learning about sex from, you know, especially our young boys. Men versus women, there's a lot more men who watch pornography than women. Women do watch it as well. But by and large, men are the ones who watch it more, and this is where they're learning about sex, this is where they're learning about relationships, this is where they're learning how to treat women. And so we decry things like, and quite rightly so, sexual harassment, violence against women, trafficking, all these different things, but we don't tend to look at what some of the root causes of these could be, or we do, but we always tend to skip over pornography.
Well, that is true. It's a controversial point, isn't it, amongst researchers, Sally Rugg, about how much pornography actually changes people's behaviour, changes the way people act towards each other in relationships, you know, what it means for violence against women and those kinds of things. And by this, we're talking about only different types of pornography, of course. What's your opinion?
I mean, I agree with Rachel on most of the points she made. I think it is worth sort of saying that the consumption and production of porn is not inherently bad. Porn has been around since human beings have been around, and you know there are ethical porn there's ethical porn you can pay for, and you know if you're over 18, go for your life. But Rachel's right, the issue is really when young people, who we have established earlier this evening, you know, aren't responsible, don't have fully formed brains, are still learning how to be humans, are accessing porn that's really violent or degrading. And it's all well and good if, you know, a 40-year-old woman watches porn and decides, hey, I want to go have, you know, really violent group sex. Go ahead. But if a 14-year-old is regularly watching that sort of content, there is a chance that this is going to influence how she behaves in sexual situations. So I just want to make that distinction there.
Right. And what of the question of surveillance, Arthur?
Well, we know that China, of course, is the world leader when it comes to the use of facial recognition technology. And we do know from experiences in Britain that it isn't perfect. So facial recognition has been used there for national security issues. Mm-hmm. And when it was first deployed, there were quite a lot of false matches. So police were turning up to the wrong homes, making allegations against people because they had mismatched them. So the technology is not quite right. That's the first issue. Secondly, the right to privacy. We have no biometric regulation in this country which will govern the use of biometrics and their retention and their collection. So that needs to be put in place if we're going to be deploying this as a way to stop children getting access to these sites. And then the other issue, of course, is, and very important, I think, is the establishment of an independent oversight body similar to the UK Biometrics Commissioner, that can actually govern what is occurring. Because, let's face it, the ACCC Digital Platform Inquiry recently established that consumers actually don't have any bargaining power when it comes to their privacy with these digital platform providers, so they can get that material and use it for all sorts of purposes. So to its credit, the Parliament has listened to our concerns on facial recognition in the context of national security legislation, and the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security is now looking at safeguards. So I think the principle is, I think I agree with Rachael to this extent, that children, underage children, should not have access to pornography, because we know that when they do, it does influence how they behave and treat people. So they shouldn't have access to it, absolutely. To Sally's point, people over the age, if they're accessing legal porn, that's a matter for them. But if this is to be a blocker for children getting access to it, I want to see the technology right. It's not right. And I want to see the safeguards right.
I just keep thinking of all the loopholes there would be. Couldn't you just pull in a big portrait of Uncle Fred, you know what I mean, when you were trying to access it?
Who knows? Who knows? But it would be quite interesting.
So I was just going to say, like, what could possibly go wrong, right?
Thank you, Sally.
With the government collecting our facial scans if we access porn. I mean, could it be like, the department being hacked, like the Bureau
Sally,
of Meteorology?
how long do we have? About half an hour? Because I could go through them for you.
Exactly. Yeah. We could be hacked. There could be data breaches. You know how many times the cops try to access my health record information? Yeah. I think this is a terrible idea.
Or the names of people could be published on site who had said have accessed pornography sites. Their right to privacy is gone. There are all sorts of problems there, and I think we've got to get the technology right and then the framework in the legislation right. Otherwise, there's no point talking about it.
Now, Peter, can I bring you in here now? Because I understand in your long and varied history and career, one thing you did was run an alternative bookstore. In Canberra, where you sold a lot of erotic material. What kind of insights did that give you about this particular market?
Well, first of all, the supplier, I sold a lot of gay and lesbian books as well, and the supplier of those books and other erotica, he was saying that as time was changing, women were still reading literature. So they'd get the lesbian fiction, or they'd get the latest female erotica, and they'd read it. So, we sold a lot of it, and they were very happy. Men were going visual. Men would stop. They weren't buying the books anymore that they used to buy. They would go online. Now, those figures we saw show that apparently men are still visual, and women aren't as visual, and that they'll read stories, etc. And we used to have a lot of the exotic dancers come in, and they'd be looking for the latest burlesque books to see what
I thought you were about to say you had a lot of politicians coming in, but you're very discreet.
We also sold a lot of philosophy books, a lot of science books, a lot of history. There's a lot of books we sold. This was just one area of it that I always look back upon and think it was quite interesting to see. People came in there, couples came in. It was all sorts of people that came in and purchased these books. There were some customers, and not many, who we had to keep an eye on, and seriously. But again, I could probably think there were 3.
Did you scan everyone's faces?
I think that conversation, it's a really difficult thing, because we want to stop kids accessing this stuff, but we don't trust the technology, and so we've got to move on this fairly quickly.
Well, and the technology moves on us all the time. And when I think about trying to prevent even my own kids from accessing things on the internet, to me it just seems like putting a sink plug in a fishing net. There's just so many other ways they can get in, and so many more things they're aware of. What do you think some of the ways around that might be, Rachael?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm not a parent myself, but it must be so difficult, I think. Like you say, there's, you've got computers at school, you've got phones if they've got phones, they've got, the friend's house and what things they have.
Such a growth in the number of people watching it on their phones now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I think, even though this particular initiative may not be perfect, and I'm not quite sure what I think myself about the facial recognition, I think what's at stake is so important. We do need to find a solution for this, and how to restrict, especially young people viewing pornography. One other comment I'd make is that while there is this particular issue around young people viewing it, and I think we all agree on that, I do think that there is an issue around porn outside of children, and as I said before,
what is it? Do you mean that violence element?
Especially that violence element, and how that causes people to view each other.
But is that
especially how
growing?
it
Is
causes
that
men to
part
be
of it
women.
growing? I don't know. I haven't studied it. You have?
Yeah, it is growing. It is growing. The searches that are being made on these massive porn sites, the ones that are coming up more and more are the ones that do, as I said earlier, involve sort of rape or sexual abuse, or and this year especially a lot of, and I think in general, a lot of racial sort of sexually abusive stereotypes as well. So like, you know, Asians and Japanese and so on and so forth are much higher up the list. There's also this particular kind of, I think, anime porn. I can't remember what it's called now, but it
Anime is one growth area. I do know that.
That is, and that people sort of say that the anime sort of cartoon pornography is sort of safer because there isn't, you know, there's people involved who may be exploited and so on and so forth. But more and more, it's depicting characters that look like children, that look like little girls. And
we're going to have to end on that note. That is not at all an unnerving note to end on. But thanks so much for all of you for joining us, and thanks so much also to our panel: Rachael Wong, Arthur Moses, Sally Rugg, Peter Strong. Hope you have an excellent evening. Ellen Fanning will be with you tomorrow. To your great luck. Have a good night.